5 kids was enough, I think. I have another little sister, so there's 6, but yeah, I was the youngest of 5, so.
Oh, so you got a big family as well.
Yeah. Hose fights in the house.
No, hose fights in the house is crazy.
We lived in Tucson, so we had all tile floors.
And you brought the hose inside.
Yeah, there was no place you could hide. That was kind of the idea, which was terrible.
That's horrible.
And it would dry pretty quickly because it was so dry and hot.
Yeah.
Somehow my mom never figured it out. We told her years later. I don't know.
She never saw how everything inside was wet.
No, we managed to clean it up, before
These are some innovative kids.
Yeah, it's like when you don't have money, you come up with a lot of really crazy games.
Yeah. We'll do a proper introduction. Welcome on, Sarah.
Hey.
Great to have you here. Today I want to touch on a lot of different things about your business, so your personal life, and seeing how you've navigated to become who you are today, and how you've had to live bravely, go out of your comfort zone to do those things. So I want to start at the beginning of Native Earth. I know you started it to a side hustle for your band.
Yes.
Which that was so surprising to me. I was like, band and gardening? These are like two way usually considered pretty separate. So I kind of want you to tell me about those early days. How did it really become the full-time hustle? And why did the music not become the full-time?
Well, probably the fastest explanation would be I did a really thorough job. And because of that, the work just started flowing in like crazy, which was kind of, when you show people that you're really good at what you do, and then you're able to manage, your time well, it turned into, next thing I knew, honestly, it's hard to explain. I had to hire people, and once I started hiring people, I knew I was responsible also for other people's income, so it became more serious to me. It wasn't just about me, so if I screwed it up, I was going to screw it up for everybody, and so there was that motivation of making sure to take care of the community at the same time, and then I thought, well, this is great, let's just keep building on this, and then I did for a while kind of play in a band when the company was coasting for a small period of time, but then I got pregnant with my first child, and so that really changes your perspective on looking at where your priorities need to sort of lie for a bit. So
yeah, I think it might alter from I'm maximizing for fun and enjoyment, and now you have to take care of another human.
Yes.
That kind of changes everything. So when you were starting out, what motivated you for this to be the business? And then how did you go about actually starting it? Like getting your first client, getting in people's doors?
So I worked for another landscape company for a short period of time, for about 1.5 years, and I made a lot of connections within the industry themselves. I always knew that I wanted to have something to do with plants as part of my career, just because it runs in my family's blood, and it's something that just I've always found super enjoyable, because plants give back in ways that, I joke that humans don't. They don't talk back. If you treat them well, they just look really beautiful. There's a lot of reward based upon it. And so when I quit that job to start my own company, I gave them so much notice, like 3 months notice, because I was their horticulturist, and they ended up helping me get my first few jobs because I had made some really solid relationships and made sure not to burn bridges when I left instead, and a lot of people, I think sometimes when they're ready to make a change, they act irrationally, I guess, instead of thinking that, in any industry, there's always people that all know each other. Mm-hmm. Doesn't matter what the industry is, and people talk. So I was known as Smiley, and this nursery was asked by someone else that then said, do you know anybody? And it turned into my first really big client without getting too detailed. And then it was just based upon my skill sets and my ability to make the property look as beautiful as I could. So I hope that kind of answers that.
Yeah.
Sort of a roundabout thing of just honestly also having a really strong work ethic. Mm-hmm. No matter how tired I was, or if I had gone out the night before, I'd always be there the next day ready to go, and found there's a lot of satisfaction in doing a physical job, as well as something where at the end of the day, you can see the results of your work. You're not just pushing paper around or serving coffee or doing something like that. You're like, wow, this looked horrible. Now it looks amazing. And like everyone feels so much better after they see that. And the clients love it.
Yeah.
Super high attention to detail.
Yeah. I think there's something about seeing the impact of your work when you're doing it versus you're sitting on a laptop writing emails, responding to messages, and you don't really ever see this big, beautiful thing you've created. Versus with plants, you might actually get that. I'm actually working on remodeling a house right now that I bought. I really do appreciate that physical labor where it's like, oh, you actually see the output of your hands immediately after you've done it, which is really, really nice.
Yeah, and I find that a lot of people have been disconnected from that feeling of like a hard day's work because so many people were convinced that it was a job that was beneath them and didn't ever think that it could turn into something that could be highly successful and highly lucrative and create a community of its own. And it just sort of was treated as like a blue collar thing. And so I specialized on purpose on more of a horticultural side, and then made sure to make friends with people at the Botanic Gardens and found mentors and worked for free in their yards so they could teach me stuff. And I created my own internship. Essentially, I was like, hey, I'll come weed your garden. Teach me.
Oh, yeah,
and they're like, okay. That's great.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing what you can get if you just ask people for help. Like, I think a lot of people are afraid to kind of ask for help. It kind of makes you look like you don't have the skill set or don't have the ability to do the thing. But I think people who have experience really appreciate that earnestness to learn.
It's respecting the work that's come before you and your elders, honestly. I know it maybe sounds cheesy or something, or I don't want to preface it too much. It's amazing how many people shy away from mentorship. And yet there's all these people out there that would love to pass on this knowledge that really is just better obtained when you do it in person versus reading it in a book or taking a class, right? The hands-on experience is just, you can't beat that kind of education. And honestly, there's so many people out there that are so wise that would love to teach the next generation, especially when it comes to passing the torch, when it comes to gardens, because this industry is kind of in a little bit of trouble. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I think you touched on something interesting a second ago, which is that people see kind of blue collar jobs as kind of beneath them. And then this kind of big push for going to college, getting an education, and getting a nice white collar job. Although now we're seeing that these people coming out of college and they can't really get a job. They don't really have that dream that was sold to them. And then people who are getting into trades, getting into physical labor, are actually doing quite well.
Yes. Yeah, the whole trade field is doing exceedingly well and is at least 15% understaffed on average in Colorado, in my industry especially, for actual skilled people that know what they're doing. And it's kind of created an interesting situation here where all of a sudden people that used to, we call it chucking a truck, like chucking a truck that's got his mower and his blower, those people really aren't around in the same way anymore. And so they're having to either go to large corporate entities where they have a crew that sort of constantly has massive turnover, or they find like the small companies where it's like one or two gardeners, maybe three. There's not as much consistency or systems to it. And then there's my business, which sort of fits in that Goldilocks zone, which is a corporation technically. However, it's not, it's like still a mom and pop vibe, right? And so when we are going to these clients and explaining to them what they're getting for the money that they're still spending less than they would at the big corporate level. And maybe they're spending a little bit more than the garden people that just like one person, like the chuck in the truck or someone like that, right? However, the quality of work is just so much higher. And so that's really what I've strived for, is just making sure the quality of what we do is really, really high and explaining to my clients the value of what they're spending their money on. So it's also a matter of trying to explain the value to the client. Sometimes you have to bring them back to where you're at and say, hey, some people spend a ton of money on a purse or a ton of money to go out to eat or to go to France. You have to prioritize what's important to you. So if your backyard is really important to you, that should be somewhere where you put your investment. And so when COVID happened, especially, my business exploded because everybody was stuck at home, right? And we should change this. We should do this. We should do that.
Yeah.
They really looked closely at their yards. So, yeah.
No, yeah. I think that one of these things that getting into gardening, getting into trades, getting into physical labor, it seems kind of scary to take a non-traditional role and not go the traditional route. But you dropped out of high school. So what gave you the bravery or the gumption to kind of go off on your own, take a very non-traditional path?
Honestly, I had imposter syndrome for a little while, right? Because on my resume, now, mind you, this is before LinkedIn, really, because it was 25 years ago or so that I really entered the workforce, and I ended up getting jobs working as like office manager and inventory control specialist. I don't know why. When I first lived in San Francisco, I worked at a nursery and I fell in love with that job. I loved it. It was the most rewarding thing. But I moved to Colorado in the middle of a snowstorm and knew that I'd have to wait until the next season to get back into gardening. But then I ended up in this other world where I was getting paid really well to do this desk job, and then decided I was miserable. And I quit what was considered a really high-paying, good job with stock options and benefits and all these things to jump in and go, you know what, I'm willing to take a hit because I'm just miserable. And when you love what you do, you tend to do a really good job. So to tie that back into the LinkedIn thing, it's like people couldn't search you as easily. So I could just put Etobicoke School of the Arts and Toronto, Canada. And I wasn't lying. They would just assume that was college. I was like, oh, it was high school. And so, there was that feeling of imposter syndrome. I would never lie, but I always was nervous somebody would figure out maybe I didn't have a degree in this, right? And then I discovered over time that nobody really cares if you have a degree in something. They just care that you can do a job, right? So there was an engineer that I worked for from South Africa, and he said the final test was them being locked into the library, and they were given a question that they've never learned anything on. And he said, when hiring, you always want to figure out what can people learn, not what do they already know. And that really changed the way that I looked at doing this job. And it was like, I can keep reading, I can keep learning, I can work with these mentors, I can work with people, ask questions. And so being curious, I swear, has probably been the biggest defining factor of making the business what it is. Because I'm always learning new stuff every day, every single day. You cannot learn everything in horticulture. You would be a liar if you said you knew everything. Yeah.
And that's the same about everything. The more you know that you don't know.
Yeah.
Right. When you came into that really nice role and you hated it, and then you wanted to transition to something new, what was that transition period like? Like when you finally let it go, and then when you actually have this later paradigm shift where you're like, oh, I can continue learning and I'm actually good at this. What was that beginning period like?
My family thought I was a little bit crazy, especially with my background of not having a high school diploma at that point, that I would give up on something that was somewhat of a sure bet. However, I just, again, the turning point was the fruits of the labor, like not to use a gardening analogy, but you see the work that you do and it's so fulfilling at the end of the day. If you have anxiety, you've got depression, you have insomnia, like, my God, like, go garden for 8 hours a day. You're going to be tired, you're going to be hungry, and you're going to feel relaxed pretty much and sleep pretty well. Most people, it really tends to cure. You're outside. There's actual microorganisms in the soil that they found that when you're touching them with your hands, they release serotonin in your body. So gardening actually literally makes you happy. So for me, it was a no-brainer. And I think it can relate to any job, really, is just being, I just took the leap because once you start in that direction, I just had this drive to see how far I could take it. And it became somewhat of almost a challenge. Like, how far can I go with this at this point, right?
Yeah.
So, which has its pitfalls too.
Oh, what do you mean by that?
Because sometimes when you get so hyper-focused on the success of it all, maybe you miss some of the elements of again, I'm going to use a dumb analogy. It's like the forest through the trees, right? Or, nose despite your face. Like, you're working really hard, but are you really enjoying all that you have built? Or are you just stressing constantly about making it bigger or being able to pay more or being able to cover costs, right? Because as you grow, you have more expenses. So it's not just because you get bigger, you make more money. You just take on a lot more responsibility. So I luckily was pretty good with taking on that responsibility, but I could see how some people get really scared. So I would say the other most important factor was to surround myself with other people that I could trust and not be fearful of this idea of training people and teaching them these skills. Because there's this idea of false scarcity, or that somebody's going to take what you know. A lot of tradesmen get really weird about wanting to teach people what they know because they think someone's going to take it from them. And it's just really just a false scarcity mentality. There's plenty of work to go around for everybody. And so if clients would ditch you to work for somebody that you trained, then you don't want them as a client anyway. It creates a very ugly environment.
Yeah. Did you know that innately when you started out, that helping others and bringing them up, teaching them, would lead to more growth within the company as opposed to kind of keeping your own secrets to yourselves, your secret sauce?
Yes, 100%. I saw a bunch of people in the industry older than me that were burning out because they had never really trained their next apprentice. They hadn't taken the time to pass on that knowledge that they had. So it was just them and maybe one or two other people that they had to manage. So I did kind of know that from the beginning, that the only way to make this a sustainable industry or a sustainable job within this industry was to grow and invite more people into the tent, right? To really like show people what it is that this job can do. And I've been burned for sure. Like, I'm not going to lie. There's times that I've had ex-employees completely burn me. But then I've also helped 6 ex-employees start their own gardening businesses as well, all over the country. And it's really amazing to see them flourish. And I send them clients sometimes, the ones that are local. So yeah, it's, people want to work in a job where they don't feel scared, like, and they don't feel like they have to lie to you too and say, oh, this job is everything to me. I want to be here forever, you know?
And then they'd leave in a year.
Yeah, you just want to be open to, like, everyone has dreams, and maybe this job is just a stopover for some people. But for me, it's my career, obviously, at this point. So it's just managing people's expectations. And I don't know if I got off topic a little there.
Oh, you can go wherever you want. How did you manage to kind of cultivate this mom and pop vibe, very open? It feels like you're connected to the company, to the business, while also growing and scaling this up?
Again, it came down to having a few key other employees and players that were able to act, as the me from the beginning, right? Where I used to be the foreman on every job site for the first 5 years, right? So I was very hands-on. And even my clients, who I still have a few of them from that beginning era, were really somewhat disappointed, being like, oh, you're not going to be our foreman anymore? I'm like, well, I'm growing, that's a good thing, right? So you got to trust this new person. And so in order to, I think, make that leap, it comes back to, I'd rather have trust and hope and faith in people than assume the worst in everyone. So I hope for the best, and I still prepare for bad scenarios. And I would say that one thing that I would offer to anybody if they're going to go into business, regardless of what it is really have an exit strategy. Like a really clear, concise way is, if you decided you didn't want to do this anymore, how would you get out? Because looking at that kind of frees you up to not be afraid if it goes sideways, or you want to sell it, or if you have a business partner or somebody that you're connected with, and just having those honest conversations about, what if this goes sideways? Because things happen. People get, hit by a car. You could have a business partner that gets, hit by a car, or whatever that is. So the other thing I would say is really, really, really important is systems. Yeah. Having like a really good system that anybody could follow. You just kind of hand them the manual. It's like, a lot of people don't take the time to create a system. Warren Buffett actually said that quote, which I'm not like a fan of his, but he said, I would never buy a company that an idiot couldn't run. Yeah. And so sometimes what's scary for business owners is they feel as if I'm not important anymore for my company to function, your ego takes a massive hit and you get freaked out. I see this happen all the time, and then they end up running themselves and their business into the ground as opposed to passing on that information.
Yeah.
And creating a system that most people could follow.
Because the problem is they're making themselves the limiting point of the business.
Yes.
And they're also the face of it. So it cannot be bought. It cannot function without them.
Yeah. And that's a dangerous place.
Yeah. That makes sense. How do you kind of build these systems, and what does that look like in implementation when you're creating a system that anyone can use and continue it on, and it still keeps the Sarah of what you put into the business?
I think there's a lot of trial and error, obviously, that went down over many, many years. Going, hey, let's try this. What about this? And finding people either, following the system or not. But we live in a technological age at this point. Really, you have no excuse to not, like, back when I started this thing, I drove around with like a Nokia phone, this hard, heavy thing. And I had a map book of the city of Denver, right? And like encyclopedias of plant names and pest problems and all that stuff. And I'm always going, guys, you have the whole world in your hand right now, right? And so, it's just like trying out different systems and seeing whether they work or not, I guess, and making sure that you're not making them too cumbersome as well, because sometimes you end up running into the problem where if you create too many systems and then people feel like they are just a robot in their job, there's no autonomy. So I don't know. It's a hard question to answer really in a succinct way. I mean, at this point, we've narrowed it down to a few things. But again, it's just like having a folder on each client, and I guess it would depend on the industry. So every industry is different on how and what systems they would use. I would just say try a bunch of them. Keep trying stuff until you find something that actually works for your organization. However, really having a system in place is important, and not just piles of paper or just, I don't know, like, what's our budget right now? Who knows? It's like, no, you should be able to look at what your P&L sheet looks like. Your P&L sheet should always be very clean and concise. That's another thing that people shy away from, I think, is sometimes knowing the actual financial health of their business. It can be scary because sometimes it could show you that you might be in a difficult place. But the reality is you can't fix it if you don't know about it.
Yeah. I think that's maybe one of the sticking points that your classic small business that is mom and pop kind of hits on, is that they're not really tracking any metrics. They're not really looking at any systems. They're kind of just selling to customers and people come back, and that's kind of the whole thing.
Yeah.
And so you figured out what that thing was for your business, and it's gone on to grow to a massive scale and somehow still keep that mom and pop vibe, which is very impressive.
Thank you. Yeah. It takes a village, though. It really does. It takes a community of people to do it. So, and I think treating people also with respect and kindness, and not, I've fired clients before. If they treat my employees like crap, I'm going to be, it actually happened today where we had somebody that got yelled at by, it wasn't even the homeowner, it was their housekeeper or something. It was like really odd. So it's turned into this whole thing where it's like, yeah, if that happens again, we're not coming back. It's like, I don't allow people to mistreat the employees, right? It's not like business first. No, employee first. And that's how I ended up founding one of the founding members of Good Business Colorado, which is a small business organization where we do legislative work, where we helped pass Family and Medical Leave Act. We helped pass the sick time, bill. We helped pass all these different legislative pieces because we were already ethically running our companies really well. And we felt, let's level the playing field, right? Like, I already give my people way more than I'm supposed to by law. Wouldn't it be cool if we kind of forced... See, I hate that. Wouldn't it be cool if we forced everybody else to get on board, but not over regulatory, but happy. It's like on my website, it says happy gardeners make happy gardens, right? It's so obvious to me. If people are miserable at their job, they're going to do a miserable job. So you have to put the employee welfare at really your very top tier. Now, at the same time, don't let them take advantage, because sometimes that will also happen. And then you work into this mentality of, you have people that have these like kind of higher expectations, or I hate to use the word entitlement because it's thrown around a lot these days. However, there is sometimes like an entitlement mentality when you treat someone and pay someone really, really well. That's great and all. And it's worked out for me in the long run, but it has to come along with making sure that they're doing their job as well. And the only way they do that is if the whole company kind of holds them accountable, not one person.
Yeah.
Right? We're like, this is the company culture, which I also know is kind of a weird thing to say these days. I don't know.
Yeah, people are pretty anti-company culture and pizza parties. They don't like that.
I get that. However, it still exists regardless if we want it to not exist or not.
I think the bigger issue might be with corporate company culture when it feels lifeless, right? Like company culture that exists and is full of life, I think is a great thing to have. And it does exist.
Yeah. I mean, every company has a culture, whether we want it to or not. You know, it's sort of like I have a hand. Yeah. And so, but it is interesting, again, the use of words these days and making sure to be very, aware and conscious, which I think has also been a really great thing. Again, finding the right person for the right job too is another thing. It's like that a lot of people don't spend time getting to know or making sure their organization, even if it's not me getting to know somebody, I make sure that the foreman or the operations manager or whoever, they're checking in, they're saying it's not maybe a uptight review process, but it's like, how can we better help you, or what things are you liking or not liking? I mean, I had a guy that worked for NSA, really high level, and just needed a break, right? Yeah. And he's like, I just want to push wheelbarrows for a summer. I was like, great, here you go, Pete. I was like, push the wheelbarrow. And he was happy as happy could be. And I have other people that want to do leadership that are great at it. And then other people, if you put them into a leadership role, they don't know what to do with it sometimes. So the other way I look at it is that that person that's loyal, that's been there for a really long time, also deserves to get pay raises in the same way that your management does, right? Yeah. Because you need those dependable, reliable people. They're no better or worse than the people that are running and managing. We just have different ways that our brains function. So I think that that's another important thing when people talk about, just go flip burgers. It's an empty, meaningless job. Everybody has, like, who's going to flip the burger then? Or who's going to clean the toilet? I don't know. I've always been quite disappointed in society's viewpoint on treating some of the hardest jobs that there are out there physically and, as somewhat beneath people, right? And it's just, I think that's what society's kind of really screwed up and gotten separated from, is that a hard day's good work can be one of the most fulfilling things in the world. Some of the happiest communities on the planet are these small farming communities that don't really have much media, and they don't, they're not caught up in technology, and they're happy because they know what they're doing every day, and they're doing something that means something and putting food on the table. I don't know. Yeah.
I think that you've made a good point there, where you have to make it possible to grow within the scope of that work, right? Like, you can't have it be a dead end job for this person. They have to be able to grow for them to still care about it, to want to keep doing it, right? I was also curious about, you were talking about people might take advantage of kind of you setting up these structures where they kind of favor the employee and you want them to be really happy. How has that kind of played out?
I got to discover what hiring lawyers was all about, which is really fun. I remember when I hired my first lawyer, she said, "Congratulations. It means you're successful." Yep, that's a classic. It's like, how is that a congratulations? Once you have your first lawsuit. Yeah, dealing with the first, issue with an employee that, was really unfounded. However, you have to protect yourself and the entity. So it's like sort of playing, you realize if you hit a certain point, you got to protect your brand, and you have to protect your name, and you have to protect the people that still work for you. It's been very rare though. I would say over 21 years, I've maybe faced it with like 4 or 5 people. I consider myself incredibly lucky, right? Because I think that overall this job attracts people that aren't looking to take advantage of a system. they want to enjoy the people they work with, because those people exist no matter what career they're in, right? There's always one that sneaks through.
Yeah.
They're really good at like talking to you and making you feel like they, really care. And deep down inside, maybe they got hurt as a kid and never really realized that false scarcity doesn't exist. I think it comes from that mentality. If I don't take it, no one's going to give it to me.
Yeah, it's a zero-sum game.
Yeah. And I really feel bad for those people at heart, because that's got to be a hard way to live.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, they won't be able to build a fruitful life, right? Because every relationship, every business, every thing you do is kind of about giving, and then you also get, and it's this relationship where everyone wins.
Yeah, and it's a lot of fear, life is full of fear. My mentor used to say that fear and excitement are like a heartbeat away from each other, right? They're so close, like a roller coaster. Like you can be really freaked out or scared or really excited. Those two live and exist in a really similar place in your nervous system, and where your adrenaline pumps or your serotonin levels or dopamine. And so when I start finding myself getting fearful, I just try to remind myself, I'm like, okay, it's okay. Like maybe this is exciting. Maybe I'm going to learn something new with this. And, I won't lie. I also enjoy winning. I won't lie. Like I won't deny the fact that there's something that's also incredibly fulfilling when I feel like somebody might come at my organization or myself personally, and I'm able to still be the bigger person and not turn into like angry or fighting about it, but still carefully sort of, as they say in gardening, weed out the problem in the most delicate way possible, and know that around the corner there's going to be, people always complain about the millennials or even Gen Z or Gen, what is the next one? Alpha. Is that it?
Yeah, Alpha.
And I found that there are so many people in those generations that are incredible. And they just need people to kind of meet them where they're at, because they were really sold a big pack of lies. And there are going to be, God, what was it? I read something recently. Millions and millions of mom and pop companies are going to be closing their doors over the next couple of years because there's no one there to take over for mom and pop when they retire.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to do those jobs, and they see it and they're like, that's a lot of work. Well, if you love what you do, it doesn't feel like a lot of work in the same way. And if you have a community, again, to just spin it all back around, you've got many people to carry that weight, then it tends to work out, There's no perfect job.
Yeah,
there's no such thing.
Yeah, like one of my friends was complaining about kind of entitlement in like our generation, and he was like, everyone's just getting out of college and they're like, I want to have, where's my 100K, my Lambo, and like all my dates, where are they? Like, and so like, yeah, I think that everyone's kind of looking for this perfect ideal that they were kind of sold, but the actual fulfillment of a job doesn't come from any money or from having possessions or like going on a lot of dates and having a lot of optionality there. It really just comes from, do you enjoy it? Yeah.
If you enjoy your job 75% of the time, I think you're doing really well. That's kind of what I've noticed. 25% of the time, we're all going to have that off day.
Yeah.
I mean, it'd be cool if it was more like 80-20, that's sort of the, what is that? The like, I hate Mondays.
Yeah.
Like, there's that one day.
There's like a t-shirt, I hate Mondays. Yeah. I need coffee.
With Garfield on it, like old school. But, I find that honestly, if you can mostly just find passion in what you're doing, even if you have to create it. You think about like a foot doctor, right? A podiatrist. What does he do all day or she does all day? They look at feet.
Yeah.
They went to how many hours of medical school to just keep looking at feet all day? And their most exciting day is when something's wrong with your foot.
Yeah.
Is your worst day is their best day.
Like, oh, something exciting.
Exciting.
I have a problem to solve now.
Right? And so I try to tell that to people. It's like, man, if you're struggling finding any interest in this, maybe this is not the right job for you, right? However, like, have you thought about learning more about soil? Or, you could learn about bugs. You can learn about mold. I mean, what do you want to learn about?
Yeah.
Shrubs, trees, like it's endless. There's endless information, but I think we've been so conditioned, especially for instant gratification. And I hate to say it, the swipes with the doom scrolling, man. And so I understand why it can be difficult sometimes to connect to a job. So I'm very hardcore about a no phone policy at my company.
That's a very good policy.
And also being on time. Those are two things that I feel has gotten lost in society. And you can't text if you have to call in sick. Because I think if you physically have to call somebody up and be like, oh, I'm not feeling well, it takes a lot more than just and send.
Yeah, like you're sitting in bed, there. I don't feel too good. Send out a text.
Yeah, it's like common courtesy for the rest of your crew as well. Like sometimes you need a day, and that makes sense. Yeah. However, a lot of times it's much easier if you could just send a text.
Yeah, you just add a little bit of friction so that there's kind of just like a bullshit test in between.
Common courtesy. Yeah. I mean, but man, I found so many people that are amazing. That's what I mean by it's a misnomer in my opinion. I really, really think that there is a whole generation of people out there that are searching for more purpose. Yeah. And not just looking for a paperwork push around job. Because the more stuff you have, I hate to tell you guys, the more stuff you have, the more stuff you have to take care of. Yep. Like, it's crazy. Sweeping floors and like...
The bigger your house, the longer it takes to clean it. Bigger your lawn.
My yard looks like shit. Like,
now you have to go out there and take care of it.
Yeah, totally. And it's like, I think that idea of that pursuit of stuff is really empty, really, honestly. It might fill you up for like a second, like, oh, that was fun. I bought something nice. But I set a certain amount of money that I wanted to make. And when I hit that cap, I put everything else back into the company. I don't want to just keep making more and more money. That's my personal prerogative. I don't say that everyone should do it that way, but that makes it so I can continuously give raises to employees, like refunnel that money into the company, because what is extra money going to get me? Yeah. But having a happy workforce and they're able to afford to go on a vacation, or, the longer you're at this kind of job. And I just... Yeah, again, false scarcity. I can't say that enough.
Where do you think false scarcity comes from?
I think it comes from a generation of people that were raised by the Depression era people, right? And those were the boomers. So then the boomers came in and they were at an economic boom. Like it was, we all know the stats. Look up the stats. I don't feel like going over stats right now. However, it's like prices of housing was cheap, education was really cheap, and their parents just pushed, get as much as you can, work as hard as you can, and don't like even throw that little bit of coffee out, like save everything, like hide it under the mattress. And it was this feeling of like, you don't know when you could end up with nothing. So make sure to save everything and make sure to get as much as you can and squirrel it away in a big pile. And I honestly feel bad for boomers because I think they missed out on a lot of just experiences of just enjoying, and not just becoming the massive capitalistic game that they've kind of created and then complain about it. It's not all boomers. Please remember, I'm not calling anybody out in specific, but then along came Gen X and we were like the forgotten feral generation, It's like both parents were working like crazy, earning. And we were like eating TV dinners and honestly, like I know it's really like we joke, it's like we're the forgotten generation. And recently it's being picked up on a little bit, but we learned how to play the game, but we knew the game was bullshit. Yeah. So like now you've got the next generation down, right? Because the millennials are now like, shit, like I don't even want to learn the game. Yeah. Like this is total crap. Like, how did you guys get convinced into this, And so, I think that there's a massive sea change happening right now. And I do think that the trades are going to be a massive industry that people are slowly really figuring out and flocking to. I mean, I have so many college educated people working for me that are making more doing this job than they would in their field of work that they got a degree for, right? There's something really off about that. So I can't change that. What I can do is I can change the way my own company functions so that people can afford to live.
Yeah, you can at least create a small change in your community. And that has cascading effects. If other people are like, oh, this is awesome, they start their own company, they take inspiration from you, and then this continues to grow. And I think that you're right that this kind of labor and working in trades is kind of going to go through a resurgence, just because I think Gen Z is coming into the time where they're like, it's all a lie. Like, they don't even want to participate at whatsoever, right? And they're kind of like, what even is there? And a lot of them really feel like they have no meaning or no purpose. And so I think that will kind of rebirth this working in something that actually shows something right away, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I hate to use the word renaissance, but I'm hopeful.
Yeah.
I kind of hope, I'm like, maybe there's a new renaissance coming where people value things like art and creative things. Like, I have a lot of artists and musicians and chefs that work for me because it actually really does go hand in hand, because you have to have an aesthetic eye a lot of times, and you can kind of know whether you're a musician or an artist or something like that. When something just looks wrong, you might not know why it looks wrong, but as long as you're curious and you ask somebody else in the chain, and if that person doesn't know, the other person will go find someone else that might know. So again, that curiosity bit that I started with, I'm just going to like circle that all the way back to the beginning again. Just keep staying curious. And I'll tell people, like, instead of doom scrolling on whatever you doom scroll on, I'm not going to name any platforms, maybe get on the CSU extension and look on Plant Talk and see, the life cycle of, mycelium.
Yeah.
I don't know, read that.
Yeah.
Might be interesting. You might actually go, wow, that's really cool. Or get a book on shacks. I bought this book about like shacks and shanties, like how to build shacks and shanties, how to make cheese, why not? It's like we have more information than we've ever had before, and the information we're being fed is as empty as it's ever been.
Yeah, we're using it all wrong.
And it's causing people all sorts of depression and mental health issues. And so I think when you immediately get somebody in this line of work, you get them outside, you get them working and sweating, their brain can't really function on some of those things. So you really do become a lot more instinctual.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. You said that throughout your journey, you've kind of had issues with getting lost within the weeds. Like, well, what is it? Missing the forest for the trees. What do you mean by that? Because I think that a lot of people, I was actually talking with my friend about this, who's like a very high achiever, and he's going to become a doctor, and he's like down that path, and it's like a 10-year long path, right? And he's very fixated on this goal. And I was kind of just asking him questions about like, what happens? Like, do you feel like you're kind of waiting on this one goal and kind of just like missing life go by as you go towards it? And like, we kind of debated about this kind of topic. So I'm curious to see what you have to say about like being super fixated on a goal versus actually appreciating where you're at.
Yeah, that is a daily practice, right? Because I think there was a whole time period that went by in my life where I realized, with my children, for instance, I joke with them that they're going to have therapy sessions around this someday, And in spring, we get so busy, but it was so important that I needed to be involved. And this was a few years ago. Then when I realized I had missed one of my children's 6th grade graduation ceremonies for work, right?
Yeah.
Can't go back. Can't fix that. It was an important thing that I had to take care of, and they didn't understand that, right? So especially when you look at it through the eyes of a child. However, it's important for the child to see, though, that their parent, their mom, is working very hard to also make sure that you also don't want to teach children that they're the most important thing on the planet. However, a 6th grade graduation, that was too far, right? Yeah. So I'm using that as an example and going, oh my God, I need to make time to go camping this year with them, and not just let that time pass. And it's easy to get caught up in work and just keep striving for that, and then forget about the important things like making time to sit down and eat a meal together, with friends. Even if you're a single person, just with friends or family members, or, most people that are entrepreneurs, I think the number is like 40% of all entrepreneurs deal with severe mental health issues like depression and anxiety, right? And I think it's because they're not taking time to take care of themselves, right?
Yeah.
Because it feels like guilty pleasure to do that. Like, oh, I'm just going to binge watch a show today, and then you're like, oh, if I should have called all those people back, and I could have built a bigger crew, and I could have, had more money so I could pay more money to others. It's just, so at some point you just have to check where you're at and go, am I making sure to make time for the things that are important that have nothing to do with my job? Or else you end up at your job feeling empty as well.
Yeah.
So over 21 years, I've had highs and lows for sure. And I've definitely harmed some relationships in my life that, then again, I was 23 when I started my company.
Yeah.
So if I knew what I knew then, what I know now, maybe things would have gone a little bit differently. However, it's part of the pitfall of, I think, any job, but,
Yeah, I think
I don't know if that answered that.
a lot of high achievers, be they entrepreneurs or in the corporate world or whatever it may be, become their own slave masters in some ways, where it's like they sit around and they want to go do this thing, but in their head they have this ambient anxiety about like, oh, I could do more, I could do this. Like, I'm not working harder, I'm not doing this. And I know plenty of entrepreneurs who just kind of only work all the time.
It's a bit of a mindset too, because when you find yourself slowing down, I was from a generation where we didn't get diagnosed on everything that we've got going on.
Yeah.
All three of my kids have been to therapy already, right? My mom's like a counselor, so I did still have therapy, don't get me wrong. However, recently somebody said, I think you're a high functioning ADHD. Or I always joked that I had the H, but maybe not the ADD. And I definitely had the OCD. So part of that because that makes your mind just hyper focus on this thing. And you work the puzzle all the way through until it's complete. You can't leave it alone. It's like, let me just move this cup a little bit to the left. Okay, now it's good. Now I can go. So there's a part of you that gets joy and inspiration from that. I don't think it's a negative thing. You learn to work within your personality type. So if you're looking to run a business, just make sure, again, you pick something that you genuinely love to do and you're not picking it for the money, because you really are excited when you're done at the end of the day about whether you're a restaurateur and you just love making the perfect dish and you see somebody enjoy that dish and that means the world to you. Or again, there's just so many jobs out there and so many different fields of work, but small businesses are in trouble right now in this country. And I'm really nervous to see a world where small businesses start to go away more and more because, then it used to be the engine of the economy and it's a lot more freedom. Responsibility equals freedom, people. It's true. It's one that you got to chew on for a while. However, know when to pull the brakes and take time to just go camping with your kids or your friends. The whole world's not going to crumple if you disappear for a minute. Or else you're also doing a really bad job running your company. I've always said that too. It's like
if you can't leave the company
away for a day.
Yeah. Then you've just done a horrible job training people.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Which again comes right back around to the beginning. It's like teaching people what you know and not being fearful that they're going to take it and steal it from you. They can't steal from you what you are. They can steal clients, but you don't want to work with those jerks anyway. If they're the kind of person that's going to jump ship to take some of your ex-employees, which has happened, it's just not, you don't want to work with those people either. And then there's always another job right around the corner. It always happens that way. I have a motto in the company, and I don't know if it's something that, what do you call it? We always say, it always works out. It always works out. Like, I don't know if that's like the placebo effect. I don't know if that's the right way of explaining it, but it's just saying it's always work out. It's always going to work out. It always works out. This person leaves, there's always another person here. This client leaves, there's always a new client over here. And it just does. And I don't know if that's, what is that? Magical thinking. What would you call that? But you know what I'm saying? Like, you're putting it out there as like, this is just what it is. And it just seems to kind of work instead of, oh God, everything's going to go to shit. And those people, if you've noticed, a lot of times things go to shit for them all the time. So attraction, what is that? The law of attraction, right? Yeah. Without getting too hippy dippy about it, but just seriously where you put your energy. So if you're like, it's always going to work out.
Yeah. I think it's also the letting go of your control over the situation. If you think it's going to work out, you'll let it go where it does, as opposed to like trying to rein it back in and like kind of putting your hands into what the world's going to do, right?
Yeah, that is perfectly spoken, actually. I'm going to steal that. No, seriously, it really is that simple.
Yeah. And I really like this conversation about responsibility. I was at a philosophy night yesterday with one of my friends, and one of the questions we talked about was kind of what is maturity? Mm-hmm. And then the person I was talking to was like, oh, it's about responsibility. It's about taking ownership. But I added kind of an addendum to it, which was like, but it's also keeping this enthusiasm and joyfulness while saying yes to everything. It's not just the responsibility, because you get lost in that. You are the workhorse. You are the one person who's like, I have this to do, I have that to do, I have all these things that need to get done. And you'll get a lot done. But will you have fun while doing it?
Yeah. Yeah. And again, that's not a way to live, really. It's not a sustaining way to live. Stress is the biggest killer.
Oh, yeah. Especially in a corporate grinding American culture.
Yeah, our country's definitely got a couple things kind of wrong with it in terms of what they have prioritized. I mean, food used to be back, the 50s and 40s, 50s or whatever, like a quarter of your budget. Mm-hmm. Right?
Yeah.
That is not the case anymore. They made food so dirt cheap. So people stopped appreciating what it took to get that food to the table. Mm-hmm. Right? It's bad.
Yeah.
It's bad. And so appreciating, whatever job that is, I don't know where I'm going with this, but again, 50% of all nurseries in the country have closed over the last decade.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. It's really scary. They can't get the labor force to do it. They can't convince their next generation of children to take it on. Or get people to buy it because it's a really hard job. And so we're going to start having shortages of plant materials. During COVID, I had clients that were offering me crazy sums of money to get their hands on a specific plant. And I said, they just don't exist. They don't exist.
Yeah.
These big, tall evergreens take 20 years to get that big. You might as well buy the 8-foot one, because by the time they have ones available, that one's going to be that height, because that's where everything was, because they had to turn over all of these crops back in 2008 when the recession hit. And it's just this chain reaction. And it was all across North America. I mean, we're talking Canada, Mexico, Central America, like nowhere you could find certain large scale plant material things. So it was kind of funny though too, in a way, because to say to a really rich person, like, I don't care how much money you have, you can't buy it.
Well, yeah, it's just not existing anymore. Mm-hmm. Because I think the commoditization of a lot of things kind of takes away the appreciation for it. Like, I can Uber Eats food to my house. Do you really appreciate what it took to get that food, or is it just a click on your button on your phone?
Yeah. And yeah, it's just to get the disconnection from what's important. I always say being human, really digging into the human experience has been the greatest gift that I've given myself, which is, plants, animals, music, children, friendship, nature, all of that. Like the things that are very human are just so important to enjoy while you're here, Just stuff is not, stuff's not that important really at the end of the day. Nobody puts on their gravestone, I wish I would have worked harder.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So maybe just an adjustment of how much you really need, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. I caution anybody going into business to make sure that you're not doing it for the money. That should not be that should never be the first line on reasons to do this.
Ever. Nobody wishes they had more money when they die.
No.
It's useless. You said you grew up in a chaotic and unhealthy kind of family. Mm-hmm. How did that impact your upbringing, and then what you ended up doing as your career? And what was it kind of like to grow up in the family? Well,
yeah, I went to 11 different schools growing up and lived in 8 states and 2 countries, 35 houses by the time I was 21 years old. And I always just sort of felt like nothing was ever solid or stable, which is, I think, why I got really into this idea of building this company in a way to make it so solid and stable that it was something I could count on and rely on. And it was in my hands. It wasn't out of my control. So when you grow up feeling like you have no control over these things, and you brought up the control thing earlier, and it is true sometimes. So it's kind of a mind screw, because on one hand, I had to learn to be really good at it, like, okay, no, we're going to do it this way. And I know it's going to work. However, you have to, like, on the flip side, let it go sometimes and release that control and just sort of like let your hands open up and go, okay, whatever's going to happen is going to happen. So, yeah. And I think there was also a feeling of working harder than I needed to work in order to prove myself, because I didn't have a degree, or, you know, that imposter syndrome thing again, right? So not getting, you know, a lot of therapy really helped, but honestly, just, I think just learning that, somebody said to me recently, they wish they had had my childhood. I was trying to figure out, they said, I think my parents hugged me too much. And my head just kind of spun. I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, seriously, what do you mean you got hugged too much and told that you were great? Like, I just got lazy. They're like, if I had to have your chaotic, crazy childhood, you know, living on your own at 15, already like cooking for yourself and working and figuring stuff out, you know? I mean, I was still in high school the first little bit until they kicked me out. But that's why I was like, I'm not going to go to my 12th school at this point. So I was like, I'm out.
Why'd they kick you out?
For immunizations. That's what they said. They didn't want me there. They didn't like me to, they didn't like the idea that I was living on myself, like on my own, honestly. And I was getting okay grades, but they were the #1 high school in Toronto. And I think they thought I was bringing their stats down. And there was just one teacher that really just didn't like me. And so they told me I couldn't come back to school until I got my immunizations. And it said I had 10 days on. I was like, oh, I'm going to take at least 1 or 2 days to screw around. By day 3, they're like, Sarah didn't come back to school. So they called my mom, and my mom's like, they said that you stopped coming to school. And so they kicked you out because you're 16 now. So they don't need to keep you there. And it was a month before school was out too. So I was going to lose all those credits for my 11th grade year. And I just was like, no. I can't start over again if I'm going to be in charge. I wanted to be in charge of myself at that point. I thought that I could do a better job than these parents were doing, than these adults, these so-called adults in the room. I said, I think I got this. And so, yeah, I had a really, really strong work ethic, and just knew that I would never be beholden to anybody or be under somebody else's rule.
Yeah.
It's weird. Yeah. And so I understood what my friend was saying on one hand, right? That they wish that they had that motivator. And on another hand, you know, the anxiety and the depression I could live without.
Yeah. I think the problem is you had a lot of fuel, but it wasn't sustainable fuel, right?
Yeah.
Like, you had things you were running from, things you were trying to get to, and it was this whole thing where it's kind of survival, right?
Yeah.
Like, and it works, and it works. It works to get to become successful, to do the things. But at the end of the day, probably caused you a lot of pain and suffering throughout that entire time.
Oh, yeah. You cannot live on adrenaline like that. It's really bad for your physical system. It's really bad for your mental system. So, yeah, I had to then rely on a community of people and get better at trusting the people around me and saying, please help. Like, there's a really cool thing that I've built here. And I think if we all kind of chip in, we all could end up living a pretty good life by taking care of this. So I always say that Native Earth isn't me, it's everyone. Right? And I think that's what my saving grace was. But it took me having 3 kids, I think, to break me. In terms of going, I can't do this anymore on my own. Like, I have to spread out all these responsibilities. So, you know, the job that I used to do now, it takes 4 people to do my job. Yeah. And I still do parts of the job, right? I'm still doing like R&D and development and all that stuff. But, you know, I look back and I don't know how sometimes I did it. So I don't recommend, you know, killing yourself over doing a business. But there is going to be hard times. There are going to be 60, 70-hour weeks sometimes. And that's okay. Yeah. Just don't let it go too long if your body starts screaming at you. Yeah. You know?
Yeah, don't make them a thing that's always there.
Yeah, exactly. And that takes relying on your community, you know?
Yeah, relying on other people that you've trained, you've taught them.
Yeah.
You've done all of that to bring it full circle.
Yeah, because again, people have gotten more and more separated out, and this job is so great because everybody's so interactive, you know? They just have time to sort of hang out and talk, and they're doing work, and it's like a lot of smaller companies, so yeah, I could get spun out on this for way too long.
Why were you living on your own at 15?
Because I went through a year of high school. Oh God, if I'm being really honest. So when I was in high school, I had originally lived with my dad and my stepmom for a while, and my stepmom was really abusive, like a really severe alcoholic and physically and mentally abusive. And I kind of hid it for a long time, but eventually I couldn't hide it anymore. Yeah. And my grades were so bad and the school was so confused. So they made me take all this specialized testing to find out if I was like needed to be in, you know, the special, what do they call it now? My sister's special education teacher, right?
Oh, yeah.
Special ed. And so when they tested me, they saw that I was like 3 grade levels ahead of everything. And so then they were like, something's going wrong at home. And so that snowballed and opened up the whole thing. So I eventually then ended up in Canada with my mom. But I was so broken at that point, even though my home life was a lot more stable, the damage had been done, right? At that point. So I would sit in the bathroom instead of go to class. I'd just like sit with my feet up on the toilet. And eventually they figured out, they're like, how did you have 88 absences? Where were you? It's Canada. You can't go outside. It's freezing out. Like I hid in the bathroom by like the, you know, the shop class at the way end of the school that, you know, nobody ever went to. And my mom's like, wow, this is not working for you. You need to find something that's going to work for you. You know, your grades are horrific. And she found this art school in Toronto, and pretty much just brought me there at 15. And they had done the auditions the year before, and they were like, we're not going to audition anybody new. And she's like, no, you just have to hear her sing. And I sang, and they're like, okay, we'll let you in the school. So I started off on a really unsettled foot on that one. And then, I was renting little apartments and taking 2 subways and 2 buses, you know, an hour and a half commute each direction to get to high school. I thought I was doing great. That's why I was really pissed when they expelled me. It's like, I got a C average. It's really great for me. Yeah. But and then at that point, I decided I didn't want to live with parents anymore. And so, you know, I moved to New York City for a while, and then I moved to San Francisco and, you know, checked out the 2 coasts. And it's a long, complicated story, but I found Colorado, which was amazing. And there's something about this state that I don't know what it is. I love to travel still. I travel all the time. It's like, it keeps me from trying to move all the time. Yeah.
If you actually go out and see the world.
Yeah. I'm going to Turkey in just a couple of weeks.
Ooh,
so
I've heard great things about Turkey.
Yeah. I went to Egypt last year, and I'm trying to do, again, self-care, right? So it's like making sure to do those things. But you know, and I say this because, you know, I don't want to throw anybody under the bus in my life either. You know, it's always one of those delicate subjects. But my parents thought that I was smart enough to be able to take care of myself. And in some respects, they were right. But in a lot of respects, they were wrong, because I have now a 16-year-old child. She's going to be 16 in a few weeks. And I look at her and I go, I was that age? Yeah. Oh, my fucking God. Sorry. But I look at her, I'm like, dude, you could barely keep your room clean. How would you survive out there? So I kept thinking that, you know, my sister always says that we were raised as feral children, you know, we were the feral generation. So I think I was just given a lot of tools at a very young age on how to manage high stress situations. So I think it grew my instincts so that I got really good at seeing people and reading people and knowing when things were safe or not safe. So it made me a little bit of a control freak too. Yeah. However, I'm working on that right now.
By necessity, it sounds like, right?
It was literally out of necessity. So lemonade, you know? Yeah. It's like I might as well use this brain that developed in a way to see the whole spider web of various ways that the world could go and get over my imposter syndrome and go for it.
Yeah. It's a very entrepreneurial thing to do. To take what you have and make something of it.
And then make sure to get good people around you. Trust them, you know? that's it. You can't do it by yourself. You cannot.
Yeah. Do you still talk to your parents?
Yeah, my mom lives 6 minutes from here.
Oh, that's awesome.
She moved here to be close to me. And my sister moved here too. My father, no. No. The last time I talked to him, I think it was for Father's Day. And I don't even know what happened. It was pretty funny. It was like something about politics. Never talk politics. I don't know. And he just was like, "Fuck you, Sarah," and hung up the phone. And we're sitting there going like, hello, Dad, you still there? And
that was the last conversation.
I had one other. I found out from my other sister that he had a heart condition, a hole in his heart. And so I found out through Facebook. So I thought I'd reach out to him at least once to be like, are you dead, man? Are you dying? Like, I was like, I do still love you.
Yeah.
You know, I don't really want to talk to you, but you are still my dad. And he was all sheepish, like, "Oh, it's really nice of you to check in." Again, part of that generation, man. They got really, the boomers, I don't know what happened to a bunch of them. They got really injured. So I hold no grudges. Forgiveness comes for yourself. Yeah. I know everybody's heard that, but it's true. It is so true. You don't forgive for that other person. You do it so that you can move on, because those things will keep you making decisions based upon scenarios that are no longer real. You know? So, and good therapy.
Yeah. Find good therapists too, not bad therapists.
If they start talking about themselves in therapy, you run.
Yeah, they're just using you as a therapist. One of the traditions we have on the podcast is kind of coming to the end of the episode is the guest will make a small carrot for themselves, is what we call it. Okay. That is a 2-week challenge that encourages them to live more bravely, more fearlessly, that they could accomplish within 2 weeks. And so my question to you is, what do you think would be a good challenge for you to live more bravely?
Oh my gosh. I think I know this one. So a friend pointed this out to me recently. So I'm going through a pretty big transition in my life right now. And I've been told I can beat a dead horse. Like, I kind of get wrapped up in thinking I can solve something. So I think it more has to do with saying really nice things about myself. I know that sounds weird, but it's really hard for me to do that. I don't even really own a full-length mirror, you know? Yeah. I know that sounds weird. But looking in the mirror and just being like, you know, the Stuart Smalley, like, you're good enough, you're smart enough, and gosh darn it, people like you. Yeah. I think the carrot would be just gentle to myself, because it's been really rough the last couple of weeks. But that feels like such a big, broad thing to say. How am I going to know that I did that? I guess I could just catch myself being hard on myself and be like,
it might be being mindful.
Being mindful.
Like
that's a better way.
Catching the moments where you're harsh on yourself, and maybe like take a note on your phone. Like,
well, I like that.
Oh, I was being mean to myself. And that's it. That's the whole thing.
Yeah, it's incredible how we talk to ourselves. Being mindful of then how I'm talking to myself. Yeah. I think that's a better way of putting it. Thank you. Yeah. Mindfulness of how I'm talking to myself. Yeah. Even if I say something mean, I just got to write it down and be like,
yeah, I said something mean.
I said something mean today.
Yeah.
It's okay.
Yeah. I think that would be a really good challenge to do. One of the other things that we do is you also attach a carrot, or no, a stick, which is the accountability portion, which is kind of something that you don't want to happen. That if you go these next 2 weeks and you're not really able to do that, then you might have to do something hard, or you might have to, like, I don't know, do a really hard workout, do a cold plunge, do something that is something you don't want to do.
I hate hiking up mountains.
Manitou Incline.
Yeah, for some reason, my dad bought us on death marches in the desert as kids. So I love river walks. I mean, okay, yeah, I could do that because I love exercise. But okay, if I can't do that, then I have to go maybe hike up Mount Sanitas in Boulder.
Great. Yeah,
because it's an easy one, but it's still an incline. Yeah, it's doable. Set a doable goal. But yes, my friend hikes there like every week too. She's always asking me to go. Come walk with me. I'm like, no.
Yeah, I love hiking. I actually do really enjoy it.
I like hiking, like on a flat surface.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's so.
I don't think we would call that hiking, right?
But it's like childhood trauma, right? You don't realize how it really affects you over
Yeah.
some really dumb stuff. Because I was so little, and everybody was so much older
Going up
than me.
mountains.
And my dad would bring us into the desert, walking through cactus, up mountains, into caves and stuff. And they always said that I could walk 2 miles by the time I was 2 years old without anybody picking me up. So there was almost this, like, they took the joy out of it,
Now there's no more fun.
No. I could walk for hours and hours along a river and bushwhack. I love bushwhacking. That's fun.
Yeah.
But yeah, all right, I can do that.
Sounds good.
I can do that.
All right. Well, thank you for coming on. It's been great talking to you.
Yeah, thank you
Where
for
can
having me.
people find out about you, get in contact with you if you're interested in that?
I guess my website, nativeearthco.com. It's nice and simple.
Yeah, I'll link it when we post this up.
Yeah, there's a button on there to contact. If anybody, I've been mentoring people again recently too. I think passing it along was something that I've been wanting to do. So I was trained by other amazing people, and I've been looking to take on the next generation of people other than just my, people that work for me.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So if you're interested in finding a mentor in horticulture, doing some gardening,
Or not even me, I know a lot of really cool mentors too.
reach out to Sarah.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.